Hello everyone and welcome to Stygian Frequencies. In this inaugural episode, we're going to be visiting my home state of New Mexico, and much of the southwest in Mexico itself with a story to keep the kids from wandering off at night. That's right folks, we're talking about La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman. Now this is a pretty old story with a lot of history and there are many variants to it, so I'll be sticking to the one that kept me awake on camping trips as a child. And so without further ado, the story of La Llorona. Long ago in a small village lived a young girl named Maria. Maria came from a hard-working family and was known far and wide for how beautiful she was. Growing up, Maria never wanted for anything and felt that she deserved only the best. For someone so beautiful should only have the best. When Maria was older, she was approached by many men from her village asking for her hand in marriage, but Maria would always turn them away. "I'm far too beautiful to marry any man from this small village. I will marry only the most handsome man," she would tell her grandmother when asked why she refused every proposal. "Mija, you need to think of more than looks. You need to make sure to find a man with a good heart," often chided her grandmother. But Maria would never listen to her grandmother's advice. Then one day, while at the market, Maria caught the eye of a cowboy passing through the village. The man was the most handsome she had ever seen, with black hair like that of a raven, a large, well-groomed mustache that curled at the ends, bright, clear eyes, and clothes so nice that they seemed to reflect the sun itself. The man began courting Maria, but still in her pride she refused him time and again. This did not discourage the man, who found it amusing, and was instead more determined to marry her than ever. After a time they were engaged. But Maria's parents warned her, "Maria, he is not a good man. He will not make a good husband." Still, Maria married him and they seemed happy. They had 2 children and a nice house, and all seemed well. But after a few years, the man began to grow bored with this family life, and started spending more and more time away from the house, sometimes being gone for months at a time. When he was home, the man would say to Maria, "I am only here to see my children," and he would spend the time playing with them and ignoring Maria completely. When not out on the prairie or with his children, the man would spend his time drinking and gambling with his friends. Then Maria began to hear a rumor that her husband was looking for a wealthy new wife. Maria did not believe the rumor though, for after all, she was the most beautiful woman around. Then, one evening, the husband drove a carriage by their house while Maria and the children were outside, and beside him was an elegant woman dressed in fancy clothes. The husband greeted the children while he passed by, but completely ignored Maria and continued past the house. When that happened, something broke in Maria. All of the anger and jealousy and sorrow that she felt overwhelmed her, and those awful feelings turned against her children. Maria grabbed her children by the arms and dragged them to the river, and in her anger she threw them in. It was only when she saw that the current had taken them away that she realized what she had done. Maria cried out and ran along the river, trying to get them back, but it was too late, and they were gone. In her hurry, one of her feet got stuck on a root, and when she fell, her head struck a rock and she died. The next day, Maria's family began looking for her, and after a whole day of searching, finally got word that her body was near the river. Maria's body was wrapped in white cloth and a funeral was held for her on the riverbank. That very night, people told of crying coming from the river, drifting through the trees. Many people thought it must be Maria's family mourning her passing. But as more nights passed, people started to see a white figure near the river, and said that they could hear, through the crying, "Where are my children?" As time went on, the people of the village stopped referring to the specter as Maria, and began to refer to her as La Llorona, the crying woman. They would tell their children, "When it gets dark, make sure to get home, or La Llorona might find you and take you away thinking you are one of her children, and you'll never be seen again." And there we have it, folks, a story dripping with pride, sorrow, and betrayal. As you might have guessed, the story has its roots in Mexican culture, and as I said in the beginning of the show, there are a lot of variants of La Llorona. Some paint her as a sorrowful woman cloaked in white, wandering waterways, searching for her lost children, while others describe her as a horse-faced woman who lures men to their demise. But no matter the specter described, it always starts with a tale that ends in tragedy. While La Llorona has counterparts around the world in many different folktales, we're going to be focused more on her history in Mexico and the Southwest. So let's start with the first published reference to La Llorona, which comes in the form of a sonnet by Manuel Carpio back in 1883. In Manuel's poem, he refers to her as Rosalia rather than Maria, which is the more commonly used name in most tellings of La Llorona. Now I want you to remember Maria, because I plan on going back to that name a little later on. Manuel also describes her as a spirit wailing in sorrow after being murdered by her husband. This actually caught me off guard when I first found out about it, because while La Llorona always meets a gruesome end, mostly by some accident and sometimes at the hands of the church, this was the first time I had heard of her being killed by her husband. Manuel's poem is short by the nature of it being a sonnet, but what it lacks in the depth of the story, he does a great job of summarizing everything that makes La Llorona what she is, and also establishes an atmosphere of dread that, in my opinion, is not present in most lengthy tellings of the story. It was with Manuel's work that La Llorona made her debut into the written form, which in turn allowed the story to evolve and spread. Over time, there have been songs, plays, and even a handful of movies about the sorrowful specter, each of which changed the details in their retelling to better fit their audience and storytelling medium. When it comes to La Llorona, many people link her to Doña Marina, formerly Malintzin, and sometimes known as La Malinche, who was an Aztec princess given to the Spanish as a peace offering, along with several other women. She went on to act as a translator for Hernan Cortés as he made his way through Mexico. While I wasn't able to find the correlation between La Llorona and Doña Marina, people do seem to make the comparison frequently. It was this comparison that made me draw my own connection between the names Marina and Maria. Granted, names sounding vaguely similar doesn't mean a whole lot, but it did make me think that it might be the reason Maria is the more common name used when it comes to these stories. That being said, this is just my thinking, so please take it with a grain of salt. Now, while Manuel's was the first published work referencing La Llorona by name, he is far from being the first to write of specters that match her description in and around Mexico. Back in the early 16th century, Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagún wrote La Historia General de las Cosas de Nueva España, which covered many facets of life and culture in central Mexico. This text spanned 12 books, of which the 5th book, the Book of Omens, briefly speaks of a woman being heard over many nights weeping and calling out for her children. Even in Bernardino's time, the idea of ghostly women taking children in the night was not a new one. The theme goes back further in Aztec mythology with the idea of mothers who die in childbirth, which was considered a warrior's death, coming back to roam crossroads to take children in the night, and who had features similar to Siacoro, who was the goddess of fertility and was often depicted as a skeletal-faced woman. So now that we've talked about where La Llorona came from, let's go over some of the more contemporary takes on the story, and what details changed in their telling, and which ones stayed similar to what came before. The most recent take being the movie The Curse of La Llorona, which came out in 2019 as a part of the Conjuring universe. I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers for the movie, but there are a couple of details that I feel should be covered to properly show the way the story has evolved over time. So the movie actually starts with a quick telling of the original story, which stays pretty faithful to the source material while shortening it overall to better transition into the movie itself. One idea of La Llorona that the movie uses and changes a little is one regarding how many people thought that seeing her was a bad omen, and if seen meant bad luck would befall you. Now the movie's take on this is a little more sinister, with her leaving visible markings on the children she's planning on taking next. While markings like this have not been mentioned in any of the stories, I did find it to make for a suspenseful plot device for the movie. The movie also included a way of stopping La Llorona by adding details that otherwise were not a part of the original story, but which play into the overall victory for the protagonist. It's small changes like these, which may seem minor at first, that actually allow older stories, such as La Llorona, to evolve and change to better suit modern culture as people move further away from the boogeymen of old. Well, that's it for tonight, everyone. I hope you found enjoyment in our little look into the dark past. Thank you for joining us, and if you did enjoy what you heard, please consider following us on the podcast platform of your choice. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, or if you just want to keep in contact, consider following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at STGN Frequencies. And until then, we'll be seeing you in the airwaves.